Hmm. Hello there, I'm Hector Combo, your friend. Today we're talking about the brave new world we're existing and how it's taking over society. So let's first start off with watching a commercial. I think it's funny and satirical, and you'll see what this is all about.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, alphas and betas. London is now introducing the newest variety of soma, the emotional enhancement substance that fuels our great society. Feeling ill? Half a gram will send you on your way. Bored out of your mind? A gram will send you on a lovely adventure. Feeling extra sporty and outgoing? 3 grams will have you living your wildest dreams.
3 grams is all you need.
Uh-oh, looks like you're in an unfortunate social situation.
Gee, I wish I had my soma with me. I'm starting to feel slightly bothered.
Slightly bothered? Oh no, that's unbearable. Thankfully, soma is so convenient that it can go with you anywhere. In your purse, in your pocket, under the chair of your helicopter. You can now take it anywhere with you. You never have to live without it.
Thanks, Soma.
Don't mention it. Thank your world state government, who's always looking out for your best interest.
Thank you, world government, for looking out for our best interest. And The Brave New World today, written by Aldous Huxley, envisioned a society that was engineered and regimented by a technocratic elite whose objective was community stability and identity. So, to summarize what is happening, I think the best option for us is to look at his the current instance that are exemplifying how the book is becoming reality. Okay, so to really simplify it, what am I talking about? What am I intending to say? Well, The Brave New World, the television show, is being remade for our audience of the 2020. And the story that I'm pointing out, that reality is getting much more stranger than we take that we know, is the story that I was referred to by Whitney Webb on her Twitter time feed. Morality pills may be the U.S. best shot at ending the coronavirus pandemic, according to one bioethicist, who decided to create an argument that spoke about the utility or the necessity to create covert plans or under the radar plans to convince people to take all the advice from government guidelines. Okay, a little bit confusing, and I'm getting a little bit upset with it because I'm flying everywhere, and I understand. But the context of what the story, this emergent story, and how it's developing, it's a psychological aspect that we take for granted. And if you remembered in the timeline of the Facebook, I shared some combo-related articles, psychological ones. Narcissists and psychopaths are more likely to refuse to wear masks, says new research. So the latest research, apparently, coming from the behavioral psychologists, are saying that individuals that are psychopathic, they tend to buck government guidelines. They're not following it. And if you take it at surface level, and if you do not look into the methodology and the implicit bias in these studies, this is going to be confirmation for you. This is going to be a way for you to say, look at all the people who are not actively participating towards a solution. They're the ones who are creating all these bad consequences in society, right? It is us, the conspiracy-minded individuals, that are creating all this frazzled reality, right? Well, the conspiracy that we've talked about, and this is the article that gets me frazzled. All throughout this article confirms so many different statements that I have made and questions that I have proffered to people. So let's get to this article. What does it say? COVID-19 is a collective risk. It threatens everyone, and we all must cooperate to lower the chance that the coronavirus harms any one individual. Okay, so the very first sentence explicitly says there's a problem. We all need to do something, right? Among other things, that means keeping safe social distances and wearing masks. So the established scientific studies that go more than 10 years about wearing masks shows that they are counterproductive, and depending on the location or the environment that you are, can be very harmful. So if you're in a well ventilated area where there's AC fan ventilations, there are different items that are sanitized and it's a controlled environment, you could possibly say that wearing a mask can help stop the spread of some, fluids. You could say that. But if you are in the open air environment where wearing a mask is actually counterproductive and burdens your immune system, then you have to make the cost benefit analysis based on an individual level. You have to contextualize based on what you know about yourself, based on what you know on these studies to be true, on your own research, own individual action, can result in your own solution. But here, we're taking a collective look at what the solutions are from a bioethicist. Now, we can go into the source, but I want you to look at their argument first before we get into his name and who he is. And, if your assumption is that he's a professor in some university, you're right. All right, let's continue. But many people choose not to do these things, making the spread of infections more likely. Right? Many people choose to do one thing outside of the collective. Now, that's a problem. That's a problem if you are advocating government guidelines that that are based on a utilitarian philosophical way of looking at reality. So basically maximizing the greatest effect of the state for everyone. No matter if it's moral or not, it's just about how do we maximize that effect for everyone, right? When someone chooses not to follow public health guidelines around the coronavirus, they're defecting from the public good, all right? And so they mention the public good because they're going to go into a utilitarian context, meaning, well, we're a collective society with a social contract. My cat is getting everywhere. And so we're a collective society with a social contract, and individuals are individuals, but if we are all sharing the same space, we all have the public good, right? And, outside of my own issue with this, let's continue. If everyone shares the same pasture, when someone chooses not to follow public health guidelines, they're defecting from the public good. It is the moral equivalent of the tragedy of the commons. Moral equivalent to make a utilitarian argument. Remember, utilitarianism, or the argument that we should have a state that will maximize the effect or utility of anything, is not a moral argument in itself, because it's much more about the effect, or not necessarily what is the best thing for a person to do, because in order for one individual to choose what is the best moral action, they need to have consent. They have to have free action. And you can't have consent if you have a collectivist, autocratic, utilitarian view of life. You're going to think that you're super intelligent and that you can understand reality more than these simple automatons that are just, reacting to their passions. Anyways, that's another philosophical diatribe for another time. But there's a point to that. The point to is that everyone gets to tell what we should do as a society, but we should not have individual choice. Anyways, let's continue. If everyone shares the same pasture for their individual flocks, some people are going to graze their animals longer, or let them eat more than their fair share, ruining the commons in the process. Selfish and self-defeating behavior undermines the pursuit of something from which everyone can benefit. So the latest scientific studies on animal behavior, especially chimpanzees or primates, has shown that collaboration is actually one of the most predominant pair bonding strategies throughout mammalian societies. So collaboration is already an inherent feature of being a mammal, right? But in this example of the public goods, where there's a shared space and there's these ranchers who are using a grazing land and using it selfishly to their own advantage, that's the case that they're using it. This is the individual author, and they're using it to make this example. Problem is, and there is no problem, I'm just saying a problem with that example is, when there's a shared space, and you could see this in Mexico, you can see this in the United States, you could see it in any culture where a geographical location has a shared resource, and there's cultural identity, there's a shared experience, people have the same language, and they actually talk to each other. So in other words, human engagement people go out and talk to their neighbor and say, hey man, you've been overusing this land, you've been grazing too much, you're going to cost a big ruckus with all the community. That is what individual free action does. And the conflict can get resolved based on consent, based on the individual's actions. Oh, common sense, I shouldn't do that, that's going to be bad for me eventually. Kind of the same way, if you're racist to everyone, oh, that's kind of bad business, because then I won't be able to sell to everyone, right? Anyway, so let's continue. Again, trying not to get too upset about it. Democratically enacted enforceable rules. Oh, I gotta love this. Just magical thinking. Democratically enacted enforceable rules. Democratically, right? Demos, from the Greek word mob, people. So a group of people getting together to enact enforceable laws. Laws have the power of violence, coercion, because the very act of just creating a law is enforced by the police. It's created by the politicians, but it's enforced by the police. And then when they get you in that point, when you're not wearing a mask, the options are clear. Either you follow the government guidelines, or you're going to be kidnapped or coerced with the threat of kidnapping and extortion. You're going to get a citation, you're going to get a ticket, you're going to get pummeled. And these things have happened. I've followed the news and shared some of that information with my friends and family, showing that it's not just a mask, it's a mask with strings attached. That is as obvious and literal as it is with a historical context. You give the government, or the powers that shouldn't be, or the central planners, any power to legislate guidelines, morality, whatever, they're not going to stop. They're going to keep on going and going. Okay, democratically enacted enforceable rules, mandating things like mask wearing and social distancing, which don't actually work and are counterproductive. If defectors could be coerced, oh, I love that word, coercion. It's so easy to say coercion, but when it actually happens to you, what does it sound like? It sounds like a goon with a uniform barking orders at you with a gun. That's what coercion literally is, right? But not all states have opted to pass them or to enforce the rules that are in place. And where are these rules coming from? Well, they originated from a technocratic, collectivist, dictatorial society in China, and was also replicated by a collectivist, technocratic, supranational government, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, and all the other lesser countries and other, third world, second world countries followed along with the Chinese model. And the United States, not wanting to be left behind in the legacy of technocracy and totalitarian control of society, followed suit. And this is another story that I've talked about, how the American empire is seeing itself lag behind the Chinese experiment of control. And oh my God, just, this is some real stuff happening, all right? This is not just me trying to be cute. This is some real stuff happening, all right? So the government in the United States, the people in the deep state, they realize that the legacy civil liberties, the legacy medical system, the legacy payment system, all that has to go. So they created, or at least cooperated with the situation at hand, the crisis. What did Rahm Emanuel say? Never let a good crisis go to waste. So whether it was created by a lab, whether it was spontaneously, randomly, which is very unlikely, vectored from a species of bat to humans and all around the world, which is a very, very rare thing in society and nature to happen, whatever the cost might be, this was a perfect crisis and opportunity for the government and the world around to reset and to choose what model of society they're going to go with. Are they going to go with the technocratic Chinese model that has effectively, remember, brutal and effective Chinese-like tactics have rescued society from this ugly coronavirus, right? So that's the choice in this whole storm that societies at large had to make. They had to make that choice for themselves, had to realize what will be the solution. Collective authoritarian action coming from political experts and scientific-minded experts. Supposedly they're experts, but they all have a self-interest to preserve their power and their profit, right? They're intermarried. Or the other option is individual action, normal human engagement, and spontaneous order. Those were two vital options or choices that were presented in the cultural narrative. The cultural narrative, I'm not jumping back and forth, but I'm also trying to contextualize. This is also a cultural aspect. The cultural aspect is of the Brave New World. Remember, they're remaking the book or the story Brave New World, and they're adapting it to the modern existence. So before, it was all conspiracy, gobbledygook, none of it really was true, and even if a Huxley type said it again and again, people wouldn't believe. But now that it is happening today and they're making a TV show about it, everyone's going to think, for the most part, I'm sorry to be this critical, is going to think that all of a sudden they're telling us the truth. Boy, no, they're not. So let's continue this article. There's so much more to this, because in this article you will see so many lies and it's half-truths. But I think and I believe that the author of this study or of this argument is a highly intelligent bioethicist who believes himself to be super intelligent above the regular individuals who buck the trend of government guidelines, right? So my research in bioethics, so says the author, focuses on questions like how to induce those who are non-cooperative to get on board with doing what's best for the public good. Non-cooperative would be a good way of saying freedom. That's a really good neutral way of saying it without elucidating your emotional response. Because if you say non-cooperative, that does not trigger your passions. But if you say Orwellian tactics meant to save you, then that really gets to the crux of this. We got to use our passion under reason and really jump through this stuff, because it's these scientists from these priests of scientism. They think they're above their humanity, but they're not. They're not. They're fallacious human beings using reason to control other people. All right. To me, according to the author, it seems the problem of coronavirus defectors could be solved by moral enhancement. A moral enhancement, my good friend. Moral enhancement. You're not good enough as it is already with your freedom and with your rebellion, and you need to be enhanced. You need to be re-educated. And the best way to do it is with morality pills. Okay, so like receiving a vaccine to beef up your immune system, people could take a substance to boost their cooperative, pro-social behavior. Half truth, half truth, half truth, and you'll see what I mean. Could a psychoactive pill be the solution to the pandemic? So in the book, Brave New World, if you were alone, if you were sick, if you were tired, you had any type of issue, you just popped a pill, problem solved. And it exploited your perception or lack of information and self-awareness to make you feel like everything's fine. It's a far-out proposal that's bound to be controversial, but one I believe it's worth at least considering, given the importance of social cooperations in the struggle to get COVID-19 under control. Right, there's always a problem, there's always a crisis, and we need the solution. It's a far-out proposal, right? Public goods game shows scale of the problem. So on this chapter of the article, it talks about how there has been some studies in games such as World of Warcraft where a player has been infected with some virus or whatever, and they're trying to find out how the individual is going to act in that environment and to figure out if they're going to help others or they're going to cause others to be destroyed by that virus. Okay, and some of these experiments, the groups win and successfully prevent the losses associated with the collective risk. What makes winning more likely? All right, and the evidence from these experiments also, they show signs of optimism, quote unquote, and also it shows the bigger problem. But I want to focus on this problem according to the author. Usually everyone loses because people won't cooperate. Why won't they cooperate? What inhibits people from social cooperation? Ask yourself that question, and then we'll return to that. This research suggests it is not surprising people aren't wearing masks or social distancing. Lots of people defect from groups when facing a collective risk. By the same token, I expect that as a group, we will fail at addressing the collective risk of COVID-19. Anyways, so it goes on. Things like keeping a running tally of what others are contributing. So what is the solution if people are not cooperating socially and, people are more likely to destroy each other, according to the research that this author is pointing out to? The question is, what makes winning more likely? His suggestions, believe it or not, will be to establish some form of a scoring system, a social credit scoring system that will tell you who's doing their part in towards a solution, like in China, where you get excommunicated if you're not following all the government guidelines, right? So that's what the solution is. It's a tally of how many times you followed the government guidelines. And the democratic implementation of an enforceable rule requiring contributions. So more taxes and a social credit score. For those of us in the United States, these conditions are out of reach, right? Even if these factors were achievable, they will still require the very cooperative behavior that is in short supply. Again, what inhibits social cooperation? Again, we're going to touch that question in the back. But there are here some things that you're going to find so weird, and it's like, for me, it makes my head explode. It seems that the U.S. is not currently equipped to cooperatively lower the risk confronting us. Why is that? Why are we not equipped with the psychological elements to socially cooperate with one another? Would you imagine that the power of nightmares, the very policies that are created in reaction to traumatic unresolved conflict? We're talking about the 9/11. We're talking about all these lone gunmen supposedly attacking random populations and killing a bunch of people. Why is that an unresolved conflict? And why is it not fully studied? And why is it that the Federal Bureau of Investigation hijacks, games these terror attacks to their own funding? Well, there's a bigger scam in order here. It's the power of nightmares. Policymakers are creating policy to tap into your pathology of fear. It creates more immediate results if you advocate for a stronger national defense budget if there are terrorists everywhere. It makes a better, more expeditious government implementation of vaccines if there's a major epidemic. It's a lot much more facile to convince people to take a morality pill if other people are not thinking the way that you are. Because if they are thinking uncontrollable things, then there is a real risk, right? It's a real danger. People being free, that's the problem. Continuing with this terrible article. Moral enhancements is the use of substances to make you more moral. The psychoactive substances act on your ability to reason about what the right thing to do is, or your ability to be empathetic or altruistic or cooperative. For example, oxytocin is used in childbirth, and it can also cause a person to be more empathetic and altruistic, more giving and generous. The same goes for psilocybin. All right, let's pause on this thing, because it shows something that is deeper than just scientism. So here the example is we're already using oxytocin to help women during labor, expedite the process or initiate the process hormonally to get the birthing process started, right? And that's one established technique that happens, right? But also on the other end, there are doctors who advocate cesarean operations, cutting up a woman in her belly to take out the baby. And they advocate for these things because it's actually a lot more predictable, more controllable, and it's quicker. So it's not better necessarily for the individual giving the birth, but it might just be better and quicker, and overall will benefit the institution. And in all numbers of cases that they take, they're going to have a different cost-benefit analysis than the individual. Remember, we talked about in the beginning of this podcast, cost-benefit analysis for the individual. Who are we? How can we make those choices? What is the situation we're currently facing? We all make that cost-benefit analysis calculus. So does the institutions. But the institutions, they lacked the conscious empathetic mind. No, the real consciousness that goes behind institutions are individuals who are pencil pushing statistics and are finding what's the best way to preserve their bottom line. That is how they judge reality. When you're managing an institution, you're not thinking about every individual case. You're thinking about the statistical analysis or the approach. And when you measure or calculate things that are easily manipulated or misinterpreted, then your statistics are going to be intensely high, and it's going to create a situation where the medical industry has a reason, a profit motive to use this crisis to continue on its existence. It's unfortunate, but the medical industry has been bankrupt for such a long time that it needs something to pump up its price. Okay, I went into that tangent, but let me pull back and talk about the effect of chemicals, just chemicals in the body, chemicals in the brain and the mind. So for years, the priests of scientism have advocated ADHD pills, antidepressants, all of these very powerful drugs, mind-bending drugs that will help you feel better. But the latest psychological research from other also accredited experts that are not necessarily supported by the government or by the pharmaceutical industry have said or showcased that whatever trauma you may have, whatever issue, whether it's sexual, whether it's violent, whether you are unable to reconcile with the past, that attachment becomes a habit, becomes an addiction, becomes another way for you to distort your perception of reality, and it creates this retardation. And I'm serious about this. When you do not process your pain, it will poison your brain and will retard you in such a way that you're going to be unable to process anything, new input. You're not going to be able to process new input, so you're going to be stuck in that past. And when you take a pill, it's going to numb you or detach you from that biomechanism that is an indicator that's telling you something is wrong, you should do something, you should change your life, you should change the way you're looking at reality. That's what the chemical is going to turn off. That's what it does. So when you don't actually process the physical harm and the psychological reflection, and you're just given a drug by the priests of science, the medical doctors who have a profit motive to keep you pumped up full of drugs, it's just the way it is, you know? I'm sorry, but it is. There's massive lawsuits against Pfizer. There's massive lawsuits from all of these pharmaceutical companies who made a killing, literally and figuratively, in selling Vicodin, selling all these bad drugs, and they knew ahead of time. AstraZeneca knew that the antidepressant drugs and the other pharmaceutical drugs that they pumped out into the market were going to be harmful. All right, but they offered it as an immediate solution that the public was going to get, right? And if you actually process your physical trauma, your psychological issues, you're actually going to develop more empathy. You're going to develop a way to intuitively engage with reality. Your subconscious mind is so powerful that after it liberates itself from the emotional complexes that are taking over your mind, that you're going to find it easier to sympathize with other people, to connect with other people, and you don't need a drug for that. But if you want immediate solutions, then you will need a drug for that. Anyway, so the following along with this article, because this is a critical moment here in just the research. The moment is where now, you know, after all these pharmaceutical drugs have been tried and tested and they've actually shown to be harmful, they're going to move on to a next chapter. And that chapter is going to be the natural psychedelics. Okay, and here's the next follow-up part of that. The same goes for psilocybin, the active component of magic mushrooms. These substances have been shown to lower aggressive behavior in those with antisocial personality disorder and to improve the ability of sociopaths to recognize emotions in others. So the people, again, you could take 1,000 sessions of ayahuasca. You can take 1,000 sessions of acid. You can take 1,000 sessions of mushrooms every single day for eternity. And you will not fully embrace who you are. Because sometimes psychedelics in general, when you do not, this is the same story. And I'm just applying natural drugs to this formula that will result in the same trash. Garbage in, garbage out. If you take a bunch of drugs, whether they're psychedelics, and you haven't done philosophical research, self-reflection, and physical participation with reality, then you're just going to end up with trash. That's the way it goes. So it's not necessarily the solution, right? But these substances, as advocated by these bioethicists, will offer the solution for the state, for the government guidelines, and the priest of the scientific priest, right? To give us our daily bread, to give us that one pill that's going to solve everything. These substances interact directly with the psychological underpinnings of moral behavior. Others that make you more rational could help. then perhaps the people who choose to go maskless or flout social distancing guidelines will better understand that everyone, including them, is better off when they contribute and rationalize that the best thing to do is cooperate. Right, but they don't actually rationalize. They don't actually come to that conclusion on their own. No, it's force-fed to them, and it's given as an immediate, right now solution, which always comes with unintended consequences. And they're rushing us to this, and it's gonna get more and more intense. They're getting the technocratic elite, the useful idiots, the scientific priests, all of them, they have different ideas and self-interest as to why they want to embrace the government guidelines. Not everyone has the same mindset, but I just find it very suspicious that the people who are advocating for forcible vaccines and for morality pills and for the government guidelines to be coerced into reality, it's funny, not really, and ironic in a serious way, that it's these types of people that talk about your body, your choice. But when it comes to your body, your choice in all aspects of reality, they selectively filter what they want. And they say, no, you cannot choose for yourself. There's an immediate crisis, you fool. Right? No, it's not true. They are so full of their own will to power, and they think that they're here to protect us, that they don't see right beneath the simple truth. The simple truth is that society is completely corrupt from the top, from the bottom, all the way, all throughout. And it has been for generations. And the madness is ratcheting up to such an extent that they're okay. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about this individual, this author. They are okay with advocating forcible morality pills. All right? But the way that this guy is advocating, all right, and who am I talking about, right? So I mentioned some of this, right? And the moral enhancement as an alternative to vaccines. I don't want to jump off. There is something much more to the final conclusion of this live podcast where I bring you the news that you need to know. Okay, one of the aspects that I don't want to skip over is this one over here, where moral enhancement as an alternative to vaccines. So his argument is saying that there is another challenge, is that the defectors who need moral enhancement are also the least likely to sign up for it. So the people who need re-education through biochemical engineering, they usually are not the ones who are going to sign up. So the people who are freedom-minded are not just going to wake up one day and take a pill and decide to follow government. No, you're going to have to give them the pill some way or somehow. If only we can find a way, a chemical, hexafluorosilicic acid, which is very predominant and it's very available in industrial farming. If only we could just put it in the water and then lower the IQ of everyone that drinks that water, municipal water. And then we could also lower their ability to reproduce and to think for themselves. And what will we call that? What will we call that drug? Oh, we can just colloquially call it fluoride. But people are not going to know about the hexafluorosilicic acid. They're not going to find about that. No, they're just going to think we're talking about calcium fluoride. And they're going to drink that tap water. And they're going to lower their IQ. And they're going to think that they're in control of society. Oh no, that's a conspiracy theory. I'm sorry. Let me keep reading this article. Another challenge, okay, as some have argued, according to the author, the solution will be to make moral enhancement compulsory or administer secretly, perhaps via the water supply. Oh my God, all these great ideas, right? So now this guy, Peter Crutchfield from the University Associate Professor of Medical Ethics, Humanities, and Law, Western Michigan University, right? A beautiful creature, from the greatest institute of American politics. I'm just joking. All right, but here's his argument. This is the crux of his argument. Some theorists argue that moral bioenhancement ought to be compulsory. Some people believe that we should all be forced into morality police, right? Into the regimented society where the public good is enforced by the gun. I take this argument one step further, arguing that if moral bioenhancement ought to be compulsory, then administration ought to be covert rather than overt. So this guy is not the one making the argument for morality pills. And let's be very clear and specific about this. Peter Parker Crutchfield from Western Michigan University, and there's more information about him. He is not the only bioethicist advocating for compulsive or forcing people to abide with scientific moral law. No, he's just taking it a step further. He's saying that we should do it. Who's we? These bioethicists, these trained government experts who are all part of the public good. They are going to get together and covertly conspire to give you the drugs, the morality pill, through some way that you're not going to be able to know. So that is his argument. And he is not the only one. All right? This is the type of professor that is ready to tell you what to think. And no, I'm not just going to say he's a socialist communist person, because it doesn't explain anything. You need to go into their argument, what they're advocating, because they're pushing it further and further. In the little detail, you're going to see that that's a great indicator. Before, all these scientists, all these, wannabe sycophants of scientism, the followers of scientism for such a long time, they've been waiting for a freaking pandemic. They've been talking about a pandemic for such a long time. And it's so ironic, right? It's so ironic that they've been speaking about a pandemic. You know who I am talking about. There's a meme that I'm trying to look into. But the meme that I'm looking into, think about the Rick and Morty fan effect. All these people who believe in science and how great it is. And they look at other people and they say, oh, look, what a fool, what a moron. He believes in a moral good. He believes in something that is outside of the factors of society that are governed by science. Oh, here it is, right? And so this meme really encapsulates what I'm saying. Remember, before, we need a new plague. The world is overpopulated. I hate humans. Now that there is a supposed pandemic, right? What's wrong with you? Do you want that people to die, you selfish asshole, right? So the very same people, scientism as a religion, has its adherents, its high priest. Who are the high priests of the religion of scientism? Well, they are bioethicists, and bioethicists who argue that we should conspire to give people drugs without their knowing, without their medical consent. Remember, the Second World War was fought because of medical consent, because the government was having medical experimentation on people without their consent. Okay, so that is the reality, and that's something that we should look into and find any way to understand it, talk about it, and say, no, hell no, this is not the way to do it, and I don't think that it should be forced. People should be able to consent to what reality they want. All right. Now, I want to leave you with this quote, and it's really awesome. There are some good news to this whole thing. There's amazing good news, and we're going to miss it. But the main thing that we miss is usually the most simple truths. And I use my Facebook feed as a bookmarking way to put all the information for a better, retelling. And here's the quote that I really want to leave you with it. And there's an article as well that I'm also want to cover in the last minutes of this podcast. Don't want to take too much of your time. I hope this was very useful. But let's read this quote. You cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. That's an important one. So the cost-benefit analysis, the context is important. What benefits are going to be using? And are we going to be spending our whole time with a life full of porn? A life full of porn, meaning addicting habits that are just comfortable. We just want everything. We want to be gratified by material goods. We want to be gratified by wealth. And once we're spent and our entire passion and imagination is burned out, we want to be controlled because we have betrayed ourselves. We don't want to be reminded of all the times that we betrayed ourselves. So I want to share this quote with you again. This will be the last quote and the last article before I go, because I want make sure that you express your innermost light and you courageously self-direct your path to the darkness, to the corruption, to the tide of corruption. Do not stray away from that darkness. And I'm not talking about that, galactic, metaphorical space darkness. I'm talking about the internal darkness. Do not shy away from that light. Look at it directly in the eyes and laugh, because that's who you are. That inner darkness, that tyrant, that's the one that you've powered up in this reality. And unfortunately, it is inside your heart. And then once you're able to train yourself to look at it right in the eye as it barks and yells at you, and just laugh and take a smile, that's when you've won. That's when you're ready to really live life to your fullest. This is a quote from Steve Jobs. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the result of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinion drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. Everything else is secondary. Your intuition, the imagination, your heart, your intention, your reason, your will, your action, all of that is yours. And it's the most valuable resource that you are giving away by embracing the power of nightmares. The power of nightmares was constructed by the policymakers, enforced by the policeman, and eventually they come down to our neighborhood, to our community, to our household, and we're going to have to face it anyways. So the best thing we have to do for society to improve is not to project our evil tyranny onto others and advocate morality pills, but rather step back, reflect, and eliminate the internal turmoil that creates the conditions for these personal tyrants to take over reality. And that is the article that I just recently wrote, and it is very important because it goes to that point and it touches in a deeper level. Are we here just to pass the time, or are we here to be, right? Anyways, I get all philosophical and political, but here's the last thing I want to leave you with. In essence, the political violence, the economic downturns, and social collapse are waves of corruption emanating from our fragile imagination. The individual is awakening to a post-human world where instant gratification no longer obfuscates the source of our existential sickness. Humanity is in the eye of a social, political, economic storm. In this vortex, individuals are presented with an opportunity to challenge their preconceived notions. I'd like to leave you with that. Thank you so much for listening to me. I really appreciate you. And I'm not doing this because I want to feel like I'm super smart. I'm doing this because I felt alone for such a long time, and I didn't have anyone to tell me that things are going to get better and that the good guys are going to win, and we're free, and we'll always be free. This is your friend Hector Combo. I hope you really take this message to heart.